Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. The war in West Asia has been going on for more than 10 days now, and this has had an impact on Indian economy. Multiple measures so far have been undertaken by the government of India, but more needs to be done. Let's understand all of this in this video. Before I start, here is a very important announcement. The final list for the Civil Services Exams 2025 has been published by UPSC, and we are happy to say that out of all the candidates who have made it to the final list, the Unacademy IAS has produced 585 plus rankers. Out of these 585, more than 100 of these rankers were part of the online classroom programs provided by Unacademy IAS, and the remaining were part of interview guidance program as well as the free initiatives that we run on our platform. As a part of celebration, now we have brought down the prices of the online classroom program to 16,999. And once you enroll using the code IAS English, you will get access to the recorded as well as live lectures, prelims as well as mains test series, correct reading material, you can current affairs program, etc. Those interested in enrolling, keep in mind that this offer, I've been told, is going to end tomorrow. Check out the details by clicking on the link provided in the description of the video. Now let me start the discussion. With the war in the West Asia raging on with no signs of ending as of now, there have been multiple the external impacts experienced by the global economy, including Indian economy. For example, in India, now there's a concern associated with shortage of the fuel. For example, the CNG, LPG, etc. There is a concern that it will have an impact on inflation. There is a concern associated with imports coming into India and the exports going out of India, and not to forget the impact of this war, which has led to the foreign investments flowing out of India, leading to depreciation of Indian rupee. In order to stabilize, in order to control the impact of the war on the Indian economy, so far some of the very important measures have been undertaken. For example, the most important one, which has been announced by the government of India in the last 1 week, is invoking the Essential Commodities Act of 1955. Under the ECN 1955, I'm using the short form now. Under the ECN 1955, the government of India will notify, I repeat, will notify the products which will be covered and called as essential. Because the act does not define what are essential, the government under section 2 has been given the power to notify particular commodity as an essential commodity. The government of India has utilized this particular provision multiple times in the past. I'll give you a couple of examples going forward. But the object is very simple. Once the product, that is a good, has been notified as an essential commodity under that, the government will have the power regarding the production, distribution, the sale, the pricing, etc. associated with the product. So government of India, realizing that there is a panic which has already set in, and there is certain rationality in terms of people panicking, the industry is panicking regarding the availability of the fuel such as LPG, CNG, etc. Because most of the fuels that we consume in the domestic market is imported into India. For example, when you talk about the West Asia, you will come across a data point which will say that 90% of the fuels essentially will have to come through these particular countries entering into India, that is imported by India. The number might vary from one fuel to another fuel, but the point is very simple. India is majorly import dependent on these particular fuels. With the war raging, the production of these fuels has been disrupted. The export of these particular fuels has been disrupted. Many of the tankers, many of the vessels which are carrying the fuels, which are supposed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, they have stopped plying or they have stopped movement. As a result of this, the import of these particular fuels has been hurt. Although the government of India has already stated that we have sufficient reserves associated with these fuels, There is a panic buying which is happening in the market. There is a concern that if the war wages on without stoppage, then there will be further disruption in terms of imports, which might create a shortage after the reserves are used. And worrying about all of this, the government of India now has invoked Essential Commodities Act. Under this particular act, the government of India has classified the consumers of the gas into four categories: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. And based on what was the consumption of these particular consumers for the last 6 months, that is the average consumption in the last 6 months, now the government of India has decided to ration the fuel that will be available for these particular consumers. For example, government already last week also had invoked the Essential Commodities Act and had stated the oil marketing companies that whatever propane and butane that you actually get, the first access to this, that is once you produce the fuel using this, the first access to this must be provided to the households. The household, that is the domestic LPG, will be the first priority. The need for that or the demand for that will be satisfied. So tier 1, essentially 100% allocation will be done, which essentially means whatever is the consumption in the last 6 months, the same supply will happen, no cut in supply will take place. Whereas the tier 2, tier 3 and tier 4, please make an observation, for all of these particular consumers, the supply of the gas has been cut. For some of them, the allocation will be 80% of the average that was consumed in the last 6 months. And for some of them, the supply will be 70% of the consumption that has taken place in the last 6 months. So this is one very important reform or the measure that has been undertaken by the government. But in addition to this, please make an observation here. The government right now has listed these commodities or these particular goods under the Essential Commodities Act. I'm giving you this information because it can be asked in the examination. Drugs, fertilizers, foodstuffs, the yarn made wholly from the cotton, petroleum and petroleum products, raw jute and jute textiles, seeds of food crops, these are basically the products which have been listed under the Essential Commodities Act. In addition to this, in the earlier instances also, for example, during pandemic, the government was worried that the manufacturers and the sellers of sanitizer, of the mask, will jack up the prices, increase the prices, make it unaffordable for the consumers. The government of India had used the provisions under the ECA in order to impose restrictions, in order to direct the producers and the sellers not to increase the prices beyond certain point. And in addition to this, the provisions of the ECA have been used by the government multiple times in the context of agriculture commodities in order to ensure that the products are made available at affordable prices for the consumers in the market, because that is the main objective for which the government invokes Essential Commodities Act. So this is one reform. In addition to this, second very important point of discussion is the government of India very recently has asked the parliamentary approval to withdraw the money and set up Economic Stabilization Fund. What is the basic idea? These kind of funds, basically the stabilization funds, are set up where the funds are kept and the money will be used for having stabilization impact. For example, earlier, one more example just to make you understand, in the context of agriculture sector, there is one fund that you come across, Price Stabilization Fund, wherein certain funds have been allocated and these funds will be utilized to stabilize the market prices of certain agriculture commodities that are notified, that are covered under the objective of the fund. Apply the same logic. With the prices of many of the commodities in the international market shooting upwards, it could be fertilizer, it could be, let's say gas, it could be crude oil, etc. With most of these commodities prices shooting upwards, now the retail market prices in the domestic market, which imports a lot of it, they will also increase. So the government of India earlier had announced in the financial year 26, earlier had announced 50,000 crore rupee allocation for this particular fund. Now this has been increased to 1 lakh crore rupees. And the government will be utilizing these particular funds after establishment of the fund to stabilize the prices of certain commodities, certain products in the market. Utilize the funds for stabilization effect. Now, this is second very important reform. Third very important reform that is being discussed in the context of crude oil is the strategic reserve. Strategic reserve. Now, please understand the reserves are kept with the oil marketing companies as well. But the point I'm discussing here is the strategic reserve that is being held by ISPRL, a government owned entity, Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited. As of now, it holds a strategic reserves of 5.33 million tons of underground crude oil storage. And this 5.33 million tons of the crude oil is kept at three places. One is Vishakhapatnam, which is set up in Andhra Pradesh. Second and third, Mangalore and Padur, these are established in Karnataka, which have a capacity of 1.5 million tons and 2.5 million tons respectively. Now, the government of India stored the reserve, and this reserve is sufficient to take care of the requirement of 10 days. But if you look at the International Energy Agency, IEA, International Energy Agency, it generally recommends having a storage of at least 90 days. But again, just a reminder for all of you, here I've discussed only the storage of reserves are done by the government owned entity ISPRL, not of OMCs. But in addition to this, one more very important point I just want to point out when we are discussing the strategic reserves is the government of India back in the year 2018 gave an approval to set up a strategic reserve of a crude oil of capacity 4 million tons, which was supposed to be set up in Odisha. It was supposed to be set up in Odisha, that is near Jajpur district, near this particular district, right nearby Chandikol. But so far, this particular project has not been established. It is not operational. The reason behind this is said to be the land acquisition has run into problems. And very recently, with the problem of crude oil supply or the supply of crude oil getting disrupted, now there is a discussion surrounding this particular project as to why the project has not been completed. What are the problems? ISPRL has sent a letter to the state government of Odisha requesting for the clean land acquisition and the transfer for the entity so that the project shall be implemented. Right, so this is one more very important point to make a note in the context of strategic reserve. Next, what more can be done in the context of stabilizing Indian economy? Whenever you talk about the disruptions in the global market, any kind of a disruption, you'll observe a very common thing. Foreign investors will take the money from the Indian market and start moving out of India. As a result of this, one, there will be volatility in the Forex market. Simple. There will be volatility in the Forex market that will lead to rupee depreciation. As such, even before this particular war broke out, even before the onset of the war in West Asia, Indian rupee was already under pressure. It had already hit historic lows against the dollar. Now, with this event or with this war raging on, Indian rupee has further experienced a downward pressure because of outflow of foreign investments. So one, the forex market will become volatile, rupee will depreciate, and this will also lead to pressure on the forex reserves held by Reserve Bank of India. Forex which are held by Reserve Bank of India. Because mind you, India houses one of the largest forex reserves. RBI holds one of the largest forex reserves in the global market. But whenever there is uncertainty, volatility in the market, RBI doesn't have any option to stabilize the Indian rupee. It will bring in the dollar, start pumping, basically selling the dollar so that the supply of the dollar increases, rupee value will get stabilized. It has been tried out earlier, right? It has been used by the RBI in recent days as well. But understand this, can we reduce this kind of a volatility? Can we reduce this kind of a pressure on the market? Of course, yes. One, the government of India has to implement certain reforms under FDI. With these kind of reforms, which have been announced by the government very recently by making certain amendments to the Press Note 3, PN3, which was announced by the government back in the year 2020, in order to basically have a regulatory power over, or in order to basically regulate the foreign investments which are coming into India from land bordering countries, LBCs, the land bordering countries. Certain amendments have been done, but the object is very simple. We need to attract more and more FDI. Another reason is in the last 3 months, successively the FDI, that is net FDI, has been negative in the Indian context. So we need to attract a lot of FDI. That will bring in more dollars. It will help us stabilizing the value of rupee. Second one, ECB liberalization. RBI has very recently implemented external commercial borrowing liberalization norms. Until recently, under the ECB route, you were allowed to borrow up to $750 million. Now this has been increased to $1 billion or 300% of the net worth. 300% of the net worth, whichever is greater. With this, we expect the Indian companies to borrow more and more from the foreign market, bring in more dollars into the Indian market, which will help us stabilize the value of Indian rupee. Third one, measures which were used by Reserve Bank of India back in 2013 can be used as a template. So what happened in 2013? There was a sudden outflow of the dollars from the Indian market. Indian rupee experienced the same kind of a depreciation pressure at that point of time. There was a record outflow of dollars. So at that point of time, the Reserve Bank of India implemented reforms, relaxed regulations which were applicable for FCNRB, foreign currency non-resident accounts, FCNRB, as well as non-resident external deposits. Certain reforms in the form of, let's say, relaxation provided in terms of providing interest rate on this, right, etc. Some relaxations were announced by RBI. And mind you, what is the impact of it? The impact of this is when relaxations are announced, banks will offer, let's say, higher interest rates. The non-resident Indians now will be bringing more and more dollars and depositing these dollars with the Indian banks in India. And this is important for a simple reason. As such, India receives the highest amount of remittances. India's inward remittances are the highest in the world. It has crossed more than $120 billion in the last 1 year. And with this kind of a relaxation, more and more remittances will come into India. It will help us stabilize the value of Indian rupee. In addition to this, the government of India should now focus on promoting idea of Atmanirbharta, self-reliance in multiple areas. Promote diversification of exports into the global market so that we are not dependent on few of the markets. And this is important in the context of imports as well as exports as well. And that is what the government of India is trying to do right now in the context of inflow of or importing of fuels. And one more important reform that should be undertaken seriously by the government of India now going forward is government should start entering into contracts or the agreements with other countries where the trade shall be settled in terms of rupees. Trade settlement in terms of rupees, it will help us in any case reduce our dependence on the dollar, right? Reduce the cost of transactions. It will promote internationalization of rupee. At the same point of time, whenever these kind of volatilities take place in the market, because you are settling the trade in terms of rupees, it will, that is the exchange rate impact will be very minimal if the settlement is done in the domestic currency. So these are certain very important recommendations that government of India should seriously look into in addition to the reforms already undertaken. Now based on this, here is an MCQ. I want you to solve and give me the answer to this question in the comment section of the video. Statement 1. The limit allowed under the external commercial borrowing is maximum $100 million. FCNRB and NRE deposits are repatriable and interest earned is taxable in India. Which of the two statements are true? Do let me know. Or how many of the which of the above statements is or are correct? Do let me know the answer to this. And by the way, don't go by the marking that I've done. Which of the two statements are correct? Let me know the answer in the comment section. If you've liked the discussion, Do not forget to hit the like button. If you are yet to join the Unacademy IAS English YouTube channel, kindly do it right away. Thank you. Have a great day.